true betrayal isn't a knife from an enemy, but a silent, deliberate choice from the one person sworn to protect you. It is a turning of the key in a lock from the inside, a conscious decision to abandon your post when the siege begins. Imagine a man, successful, polished, admired, deliberately silencing his phone, not just ignoring it, but actively muting the world. The screen lights up again and again with the same name, a name he once whispered with love but now associates only with obligation, burden, and the damp, clinical smell of sickness. Imagine him toasting champagne with his lover in a high-rise suite, the bubbles reflecting the city's electric glow, while 50 desperate calls from his wife go unanswered, each one a silent scream and devoid of his profound indifference. Each vibration is a heartbeat of panic he chooses to extinguish. Now imagine the sun rising, pale and cold, over a city washed clean by the storm, to reveal that his only child took their final breath in that same darkness, a death he alone could have prevented with a simple turn of the wheel, a 5-minute drive, a single moment of basic human decency. This is not merely a tale of infidelity, of a broken vow. That is too small a frame for this catastrophe. This is a chronicle of devastating consequence, a domino fall that begins with selfish thought and ends with a universe of grief, meticulously mapping the distance between a casual lie and a coffin. It is the story of a man named Adrian Wolfe, who built his life on the unshakable belief that the rules were for other people, that his money and position were a suit of armor, and the retired judge, his own father-in-law, who decided to teach him otherwise, using the very law Adrian thought he could manipulate and the very systems he believed he owned. If you believe that actions must eventually meet their reckoning, that no debt of soul goes forever unpaid, that the universe is a ledger etched in something harder than stone, hit the like button now. Let's get started. The storm lashed against the penthouse windows with a fury that felt personal, almost sentient. It wasn't just rain. It was a torrential assault, turning the city's glittering skyline into a watercolor of blurred neon, a masterpiece of isolation painted in streaks of gold and smeared crimson. Inside, the air was sterile and quiet, artificially cooled to a perfect 70 degrees and scented with a tang of polished leather, expensive sandalwood aftershave, and a creeping, unnameable dread that had seeped into the very walls. 60 stories above the chaotic streets, they were in a gilded cage. 6-year-old Liam lay in the vast, too-large bed, his small frame nearly lost in the sea of thousand-thread county Egyptian cotton. His breathing was a thin, labored whistle, a sound that had become the relentless soundtrack to his mother's life for years. Each gasp seemed to claw his way out, a tiny, desperate battle fought in the constricted alleyways of his lungs. His mother, Clara, pressed a cold cloth to his forehead, her own heart pounding a frantic, syncopated rhythm against a deep bass line of thunder and wind. She watched the numbers on the pulse oximeter clip to his finger with a hunter's focus. 92. It had been 94 an hour ago. The specialized inhaler, their usual lifeline, was empty, a plastic husk on the nightstand. The pharmacy, besieged by the storm, couldn't deliver. Their last resort, the powerful emergency corticosteroids that could force open his airways in minutes, sat in a sealed, bright red medical kit in the trunk of her husband's car, a mere 60 floors and an elevator ride below. Yet in this moment, it might as well have been on another planet, locked in a vault. The heavy, oak door to the master's suite swung open with a soft, expensive sigh. Adrian Wolfe strode in, his movements precise, economical. He was already adjusting the cuffs of his tailored, midnight blue suit as if entering a boardroom, not his son's sick room. At 39, he commanded Wolfe Maritime, a shipping empire built less on visionary innovation and more on the formidable family name he'd inherited and a cold ruthlessness he mistook for strategic genius. His eyes performed a swift, clinical scan of the room, the valuable abstract painting, the panoramic view now obscured by a waterfall of rain, the rich mahogany furniture, pausing finally on his son with a look of detached impatience, as if the boy were a malfunctioning piece of office equipment delaying an important meeting. "I'm leaving," he announced, his voice smooth, devoid of any warmth or concern. Critical, last-minute merger talks with the Singapore group. They flew in early because of the storm. It's going to be a marathon session. Don't bother waiting up. Clara stood, her joints stiff with hours of tense vigil. Adrian, you can't. The nurse just called. The parkway is completely flooded. She can't make it. Liam needs his emergency medication. The red kid in your car. His oxygen monitor is dropping. Adrian sighed, a long, weary exhalation that dripped with contempt he'd long since stopped bothering to hide. Clara, you're catastrophizing again. It's asthma. He's had it since he was 2. He'll be fine. He always is. You work yourself into a state, and it's never as bad as you think. He is not fine, she pleaded, her voice cracking as she crossed the room and grabbed his wrist, feeling the cool, heavy metal of his platinum Rolex beneath her fingers. Just listen to him. Please. If you absolutely must go, then leave the keys. I may need to drive him to St. Catherine's if this gets worse. He pulled his arm away as if her touch were acidic, his face hardening into a familiar, impenetrable mask she knew too well, the one that signaled the absolute end of any discussion. I need the car. The Audi has the best traction control for this weather. And that merger is worth $50 million minimum, with an 8-figure annual upside. That money is what funds all of this. Your life, his private specialist, this apartment, the vacations. Everything. So, please, for once, stop with the theatrical guilt. It's exhausting. He turned on his heel, a perfect pivot, and snatched his phone from the dresser, without a single glance back at the bed where his son fought for every molecule of air. What Clara, in her terrified, love-worn state, couldn't possibly know, what she would never have allowed herself to suspect, was that there was no merger. There were no anxious investors from Singapore waiting in a downtown conference room, no marathon session of high-stakes negotiation. The only thing waiting was a hotel room, already paid for, and a woman who asked for nothing but his attention. Adrian drove his sleek black sedan not toward the glittering, rain-shrouded canyons of the financial district, but uptown, navigating to the rain-slicked, near-empty streets to the opulent, discreet Regency Hotel. Its awning was a golden promise of separation from the messy, demanding world. In Suite 1202, his junior associate, Mia, was waiting. The room was already warm, smelling of her signature jasmine perfume and the chilled bottle of Dom Perignon she'd ordered from room service. She represented a world without responsibility, without the sour scent of medicine and the sound of a weak, rattling cough in the night, a world of uncomplicated admiration and easy pleasure. As he parked in the underground ballet lane, the life-saving red kit sat forgotten in his dark trunk, nestled uselessly next to a set of custom golf clubs and a case of 2009 Bordeaux. He saw the cascade of missed calls from Clara flash once on a screen, a brief, silent alarm. Just panic, he muttered to himself, a mantra he perfected over years of minor domestic crises. With a deliberate, practice swipe, he enabled Do Not Disturb, ensuring no sound or light would pierce his bubble. Then, for good measure, as a final, symbolic act of severance, he held the power button until the screen went black and empty entirely. The world outside, with its storms and sick children and its pleading wives, ceased to exist. He was now officially, gloriously unreachable. Back in the penthouse, the nightmare was accelerating from a state of high anxiety into pure, unadulterated horror of a parent's worst fear. At 9:20 p.m., Liam woke up choking, but this was different. It wasn't the familiar, worrying wheeze. This was a silent, terrifying fight for air, his small chest heaving uselessly, his lips parting in a soundless plea, his eyes wide with primal panic that communicated everything his voice could not. Clara's own breath caught in her throat, mirroring his. A cold, sick certainty flooded her veins. Then the lights flickered wildly, a strobe effect of dread. The power surged with a loud pop and died, plunging the room into a blackness, so complete it felt solid. The backup generators in the building's bowels whirred to life a moment later, restoring a dim, emergency glow to the main rooms, but the sensitive medical equipment beside the bed sparked once with a tiny blue flash and went permanently, irrevocably dark. No, 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 no. Clara screamed, grabbing the nebulizer and shaking it as if violence could shock it back to life. She fumbled for a phone, her fingers slippery with cold sweat. She dialed 911, pressing the device to her ear with a trembling hand. After an eternity of ringing, a calm, recorded female voice informed her that due to severe weather conditions impacting citywide services, wait times were currently over 90 minutes. She was advised to call back if the situation became life-threatening. A hysterical laugh bubbled in her chest. She hung up and called Adrian. It rang once, a bland, corporate ringtone, and then clicked straight to generic voicemail greeting. His professional one, not his personal. Adrian, please pick up. It's an emergency. Liam can't breathe. The machine is dead. I need the kit from your car. Where are you? She yelled into the void, her voice shredded with fear. She called again, and again, and again. Each failed connection, each beep signaling his voluntary absence, felt like another nail being hammered into a coffin she refused to imagine. Meanwhile, in the soundproof, climate-controlled cocoon of Suite 1202 at the Regency, Adrian was laughing, a low, rich, relaxed sound, as he poured a second glass of crisp, expensive white wine. Mia traced a finger along his jawline, her nails perfectly manicured, painted a shade of crimson he'd bought for her. Won't your wife wonder where you are in all this? She teased playfully, nodding toward the dramatic storm still raging outside their floor-to-ceiling window, a private light show for their illicit evening. Clara believes what I tell her, he smirked, pulling her closer, inhaling the scent of her perfume. So different from the sterile smell of home. She's exceptionally good at that. It's one of her more useful qualities. Besides, a man needs a reprieve, a break from all that constant sickness. The pills, the machines, the worry. It's emotionally draining. The suite heard nothing but their murmured conversation, the soft clink of crystal glasses, and the nearly silent hum of climate control, a masterpiece of engineering that perfectly isolated them from the tragedy unfolding just a few miles downtown, in a dark stairwell where a mother's world was ending. At 9:45 p.m., driven by a primal maternal desperation that overrode sheer physical exhaustion and bone-deep terror, Clara, cradling Liam's frighteningly limp, growing heavier body against her chest, kicked open the heavy, fire-rated metal door to the emergency stairwell. It slammed against the concrete wall, with a crash that echoed into the abyss below. The concrete cavern was dank, cold, and echoed with the storm's distant fury, a booming, impersonal soundtrack. She ran. Her breaths came in sobbing, ragged gasps that horribly mirrored her son's failed ones, down flight after endless, circling flight. The yellow numbers on the walls blurred into a sickening spiral. 45, 44, 43. Her legs burned with lactic acid fire. Her arms screamed with the precious, dwindling weight they carried. Each step jolted through her spine. She whispered promises, prayers, curses. On the 18th floor landing, her body, pushed far beyond its limits, finally betrayed her completely. A searing cramp locked the muscle in her calf. Her strength gave out. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the cold, gritty concrete, scraping her knees through her trousers, clutching her son to her, rocking back and forth as if the motion could somehow jump-start his still heart. His struggle. She realized with a jolt of ice water in her veins that froze her from the inside out, had stopped. The awful, familiar whistling silence was now absolute, profound, deafening. Liam, she whispered, her voice a dry leaf rustle in the vast, hollow space. She put her ear to his little chest, still warm from the fever, still soft in his dinosaur pajamas. Nothing, no flutter, no faint beat, just a hollow, still quiet that was 1,000 times louder than any scream. The wail that tore from her then was not human. It was the sound of the universe ripping a hole where a soul had been. It echoed up and down the concrete shaft, a raw, animal sound of pure, unmitigated devastation, a sound that should crack the foundation of the building. No one heard it. The storm drowned it out. The thick floors absorbed it. Adrian, miles away, heard nothing but Mia's light laughter. The morning dawned clear, sharp, and bitterly cold, the sky a mocking, brilliant, cloudless blue, as if the violence of the night had never happened. Adrian returned to the penthouse at 7:45 a.m., his phone now powered on but his voicemail deliberately unchecked, his mind already crafting and rehearsing the intricate story of the arduous, all-night negotiation. The tough concessions, the blown fuses at the office, the decision to crash at a nearby club. He carried a crisp paper bag from the exclusive French patisserie on the corner. "Clara, I'm back. I brought breakfast. Your favorite almond croissants." The silence that answered was not peaceful or sleepy. It was a vacuum, a hollow, vacant silence that had weight and texture, like a physical presence in the foyer. It felt wrong. He found her in the bedroom, sitting perfectly still on the edge of the unmade bed, still in the clothes from the night before, now stained with sweat and smeared with gray concrete dust from the stairwell. Her hair was matted. Her eyes, when she slowly turned them to him, were empty wells, all the light and life and love drained out, leaving behind only a flat, dark reflection. "Clara, where's Liam?" She turned her head slowly, as if moving through thick syrup, each movement an immense effort. "The medical examiner has him," she stated, her voice flat, devoid of all inflection, all music, all emotion. It was the voice of a ghost. "He died at 9:52 last night, in the stairwell, on the 18th floor landing." Adrian choked out a nervous, disbelieving laugh, a reflex of denial. "Stop it. That's a sick joke. That's not funny. Where is he really? At the hospital for observation?" "I called you 53 times, she continued in that same terrifying, monotone drone, ignoring his question. "I needed the kit in your car. The red one. The one you told me you always had, just in case. The one you promised was always there." The color drained from Adrian's face, leaving a sickly, ashen gray. The vivid, technicolor image of the medical box, bright red against a black trunk carpet, flashed in his mind with painful clarity, followed immediately by the memory of slamming that trunk shut without a second thought, his mind already on the hotel, on Mia, on escape. "He wasn't in a meeting, Clara." A gravelly, authoritative voice, aged by whiskey and wisdom, spoke from the doorway. Adrian spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. Leaning on a cane of polished ebony, its handle carved into the shape of a stern eagle's head, stood Silas Vance, Clara's father, a former federal judge. His reputation was forged in the fire of high-profile organized crime trials and the genuine fear he inspired in guilty men. He was a monument carved from granite, draped in a charcoal three-piece suit that probably cost more than Adrian's first car. "I traced your phone's GPS ping, Adrian." A courtesy call from an old friend at the telecom provided the coordinates. "You were at the Regency Hotel last night from 8:17 p.m. until 7:02 a.m. Suite 1202. Amir Reynolds, listed as your executive assistant, checked in at 7:30 p.m. At 9:50 p.m., the precise moment my grandson was fighting for the air you denied him, you charged a room service order of steak tartare and a bottle of 2010 Chateau Margaux to the suite." Silas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply reached into his breast pocket and threw a printed, high-resolution security photo onto the floor at Adrian's feet. It showed Adrian and Mia locked in intimate, passionate embrace by the elevator banks, her head tilted back in laughter, his hand on the small of her back. The timestamp in the corner was damning, a digital monument to his betrayal. "My daughter called you 53 times. You didn't pull a trigger, but you handed fate the loaded gun, smirked, and looked the other way. That makes you more than negligent. It makes you complicit." "Get out," Clara whispered, the first flicker of emotion, a deep, abiding, bottomless revulsion entering her dead eyes. When Adrian took a step toward her, his hands outstretched in a pathetic, theatrical gesture of supplication, she moved with shocking speed. She hurled a heavy, lead crystal bookend from the nightstand, It missed his head by inches and shattered the ornate Venetian mirror behind him, an intricate web of cracks exploding across the surface, destroying the reflection of the man he thought he was. I hope you suffer everything you are. I hope you feel it all, every second, for the rest of your miserable life. Silas stepped forward, placing his own body between them, his gaze icy enough to freeze the flames of hell. You have 1 hour. Take your clothes, nothing else. Leave the building access fobs, the company laptop, and the car keys on the hall table. Those assets are now frozen under an emergency court order I filed at dawn. My car is waiting downstairs to take you wherever you wish to go, provided it is away from here. You can't do that. Adrian spat, arrogance flaring to cover the tsunami of panic rising in his gut. That's my company. My car. You have no right. Silas offered a thin, dangerous smile that didn't reach his cold, flinty eyes. You forget, boy. I co-signed your expansion loans 3 years ago when the traditional banks found your collateral lacking. I hold the paper. The original, personally guaranteed notes. And as of this morning, citing the moral turpitude and reputational risk clauses buried in Section 14B, I've called every single cent due payable immediately. You are, as of 8:03 a.m., technically insolvent. Run, Adrian, while you still have shoes on your feet. Adrian fled, grabbing a hastily packed suitcase of designer clothes, his mind reeling but still clinging, with the tenacity of the truly arrogant, to the idea of damage control. He thought of his high-priced lawyers, of countersuits for defamation and unlawful seizure, of the PR firm that could spin this. He believed it was a temporary setback, a dramatic but ultimately surmountable skirmish. He was catastrophically, monumentally wrong. The true, meticulous, surgical dismantling of his life was only beginning. And Silas Vance was a master architect of ruin, a man who had spent a lifetime studying the blueprints of failure. 3 days later, under a sky the color of old slate and bruised lilac, Liam Vance Wolfe's funeral was held at the cavernous, Gothic St. Michael's Cathedral. The city's elite filled the pews, a whispering sea of somber black wool and silk. Their presence dictated less for the shattered family and more for the looming, formidable return of Silas Vance, the legendary Iron Judge, back in the arena for the most personal and brutal case of his life. The air was thick with the smell of lilies and intrigue. Clara stood by the heartbreakingly small white casket, veiled and ghost-like, a statue of grief made flesh. She did not weep. She seemed carved from marble. Adrian had been explicitly warned via a terse, unadorned letter from Silas's personal attorney that his presence would be considered a hostile act. Yet, driven by narcissistic calculation and a warped sense of appearance, what would people think if the father wasn't there? He arrived mid-service, slipping in through a side door. His face was carefully arranged into what he believed was a perfect picture of grief-stricken fatherhood. Lips slightly parted, eyes downcast, a slight tremble in his jaw. He walked along, echoing central aisle, the eyes of the congregation burning into his back like brands. He almost made it to the front row, to the small space he assumed was reserved for him, before a familiar cane of polished ebony slid horizontally, silently, barring his path like a gate coming down. Silas, seated in the aisle seat of the third row, didn't stand. He simply looked up, his face a granite, cliff of utter contempt. That was your son when he needed you, Silas said, his voice low but carrying to the first 10 rows in the perfect acoustics of the cathedral. Now he is my grandson. You are a trespasser in this house of mourning. You are not family here. You are a stranger, and you are not welcome. Clara turned then, a slow, deliberate, almost robotic movement. She lifted her black veil, revealing a face that was gaunt pale, but eerily, terrifyingly calm. Let him come, she said, her voice clear as a bell in the stunned silence. Adrian's heart leapt with brief, foolish, soaring triumph. She still loves me. She needs me. This is my end. It died an instant later, crushed under the weight of her next words and the gesture that accompanied them. She pointed a slender, unadorned finger not at him, but past him, toward the deep shadows at the back of the cavernous church. We aren't burying Liam today. The medical examiner has released his body for service, but the burial is delayed pending the completion of a more thorough investigation. They have some new questions. From the shadows near the great oak doors, a woman in a sharp, gunmetal gray suit detached herself from the stone pillar. Detective Anya Miller. Her heels clicked like a metronome of doom on the ancient stone floor as she began her long walk forward. Two uniformed officers fell into step beside her. Adrian Wolfe, she announced, her voice pitiless and clear in the sacred space, a profane intrusion of the state into the house of God. You are under arrest for criminal negligence and obstruction of assistance in a life-threatening emergency. You have the right to remain silent. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. The handcuffs, cold and heavy as sin, clicked shut with a sound that seemed to echo louder than the pipe organ's final note. The holy silence was utterly shattered by the frantic flashing of cameras from a discreet press pool in the choir loft as he was dragged, stumbling, shouting incoherent protests about setups and vendettas, from his son's funeral, his pathetic performance ending not in a curtain call, but in a very public perp walk down the cathedral steps. A castle built on the shifting, treacherous sands of deceit will always, inevitably, crumble from within. Its foundations cannot hold. On bail and publicly eviscerated, his face plastered on the front page of every tabloid under headlines like The Champagne Father, Adrian stormed into the gleaming, titanium-clad headquarters of Wolfe Maritime, intent on reclaiming his throne, on firing the treacherous CFO, on unleashing his legal team. He was met not by deferential, bowing staff, but by the smug, unsettling presence of Julian Croft, a corporate raider famously known as the Vulture, leaning against a reception desk and smiling like a man who'd already won. "Boardroom, Adrian." "You're late," Croft said, checking his Patek Philippe. Adrian shoved past him, took a private elevator to the top floor, and burst into the penthouse boardroom, only to find it occupied, the air thick with the scent of his own betrayal. At the head of his table, in his leather chair, sat Silas Vance. The other 11 board members, people he'd appointed, people he'd vacationed with, studied their hands, the polished mahogany, the skyline view, anything to avoid his eyes. The board has convened and voted in an emergency session at 8 a.m. this morning. Silas said, without preamble, not even looking up from a single sheet of paper before him, "You're terminated. For cause." Silas then revealed the preliminary results of a forensic audit he'd commissioned the day Liam died. Over $487,000 in corporate funds over 18 months funneled to Mia Reynolds, strategic consultant, for nebulous market analysis and client outreach, services never documented, never delivered, blatant, provable, felony-level embezzlement, masked as executive compensation. We've also found irregularities in the offshore logistics accounts in the Caymans, but that's a matter for the SEC and the federal prosecutors who will be contacting you shortly, Silas added, almost as an afterthought. Adrian was physically escorted out by his own head of security, a former Marine named Frank, who he'd known for a decade, played golf with, confided in. "Sorry, Mr. Wolfe," Frank said, his face impassive, his hand firm on Adrian's elbow. "Mr. Vance signed my retention and discretion bonus this morning. The new management values loyalty. Broken, bankrupt, and living in a dingy, hourly-rate motel near the airport where the thin walls throb with a constant scream of jet engines, Adrian played his final, desperate, losing card. Using a burner phone bought with his last $100 in cash, he lured Mia to a derelict, freezing warehouse on the polluted waterfront, a place he once used for overflow storage, intending to threaten, intimidate, or maybe even beg her into recanting her statement, into telling a story of misunderstanding. But when the rusted roller door creaked open, scraping in protest, it was Silas who stood there, silhouetted against the gray, watery afternoon light, flanked by two imposing, silent men who had private military contractor written in the set of their shoulders and the cold assessment in their eyes. "She came to my office 4 days ago, Adrian," Silas said calmly, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. She's a pragmatic girl. She saw the trajectory. She's now fully cooperating with the district attorney's office in exchange for full immunity from fraud and conspiracy charges. Her sworn deposition is already entered into evidence. Enraged, cornered, feeling the walls of his life collapsing in on him, Adrian hissed his secret weapon, the one he'd been saving for a moment of maximum leverage, unearthed from a box of old paper files during his first year at the company. I know about 1998, Silas, the so-called suicide of Judge Peterson, the one that cleared the way for your appointment to the federal bench. I found the old, encrypted shipping manifest in the company archives. Wolfe Maritime, under your confidential direction, moved a very specific evidence lock container from a federal holding facility the night before he was found. That container later disappeared. I have digital copies, scans. They're held in a secure cloud vault set to auto-release to every major news desk in the country, unless I enter a code every 24 hours. Drop the charges. Unfreeze the accounts. Give me $5 million in a passport, and the secret of your ascent stays buried. Silas laughed then, a dry, rattling sound of genuine, almost weary amusement. He shook his head slowly. Those manifests, Adrian, were exquisite forgeries I had a trusted colleague plant in the digital archives 2 years ago, around the time I first realized the depth of your moral vacancy. Bait for a particularly greedy and unscrupulous rat. I wanted to see what you would do with what you thought was power, and you just performed perfectly. You confessed to the attempted blackmail of a former federal officer in front of 2 impeccable witnesses who happened to be licensed private investigators with audio recording permits. He clicked off a small, high-fidelity digital recorder he'd pulled from his overcoat pocket. Adrian, in a blind, shattering fury that erased all reason, lunged with a length of steel pipe he'd hidden behind a pallet. One of Silas's guards moved with frightening, effortless speed. He caught Adrian's wrist mid-swing, twisted it in precise, brutal motion until the ulnar bone snapped with an audible, sickening crunch, and drove him face first into the filthy, oil-stained concrete floor. The approaching wail of sirens, growing louder, became Adrian's new, permanent soundtrack. The Glass House Trial, so named by the media for the very public, very total shattering of Adrian Wolfe's pristine, curated life, captivated the nation for weeks, a modern-day morality play broadcast on cable news. Adrian's overworked, underfunded public defender, a young man named Ben Giles with perpetual dark circles under his eyes, tried a cruel, last-ditch strategy, painting Clara as a hysterical, incompetent mother, a woman so consumed by anxiety that her panic directly contributed to the tragedy. He highlighted her history of therapy, her calls to Adrian over minor incidents. But it was the prosecution's star witness, Mia Reynolds, now looking plain and remorseful in a simple blue dress, who delivered the killing blow, the moment replayed on every news channel. On the stand, under the harsh, unforgiving courtroom lights, she testified, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine shame and horror at her own complicity. He saw the text preview come up on his screen. It just said, "Liam can't breathe." He showed it to me. He laughed, a short, dismissive laugh, and said, "He does this, holds his breath for attention until he passes out. It's a manipulative little game. He'll start again in a minute. She needs to stop coddling him." Then he put the phone in the ice bucket to muffle the vibration, and he poured us more champagne. The jury's collective disgust was a physical force in the room, a wave of nausea and condemnation. The verdict was swift, unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Manslaughter in the second degree, reckless endangerment, criminal negligence, attempted extortion. The judge, peering down over his spectacles with the weary disdain of a man who has seen every kind of evil, sentenced him to 25 years without the possibility of parole, condemning his profound, staggering, and depraved indifference to human life. 3 years into his sentence at a grim, fortress-like upstate correctional facility, Adrian, now just inmate #B89407, received a visitor, his first. His heart, long since atrophied into a bitter lump, gave a pathetic thud of hope. A lawyer? A journalist? He was marched, shackled at the waist and ankles, into a private, non-contact visiting room. It was Clara. She looked vibrant, healthy, her skin glowing, her eyes clear and focused. She wore a simple butter yellow dress, Liam's favorite color, a splash of sunshine in the gray sterility. She was a vision of a life moving forward, a gut punch of normalcy. "I came to tell you about the company," she said, her voice calm, even without malice or warmth. Just a statement of fact. Wolfe Maritime no longer exists. We dissolved the toxic brand, sold the naming rights. It's called the Liam Foundation now. Adrian stared, uncomprehending, his mind struggling to parse the words. We liquidated all non-essential assets, the corporate jets, the yacht, the empty offices. We converted the entire operational fleet. Your ships, your planes, your trucks, they are all painted white with green stripe now. They deliver free medical supplies, vaccines, field hospitals, and respiratory equipment to children in war zones, refugee camps, and areas decimated by natural disasters. We partner with UNICEF and Doctors Without Borders. She slid a glossy, professionally designed brochure across the scar metal table between them. On the cover was a breathtaking photograph of a rugged, all-terrain mobile clinic trekking through a dusty, sun-baked landscape, a line of hopeful mothers and children waiting nearby. Its side was emblazoned with bold, hopeful letters, the Liam Respiratory Unit. Every single dollar you squeezed from the world, every cent you hoarded and stole and wasted, now buys a breath for a child you will never meet. It saves the children you failed. You turned my empire into a charity," he rasped, his voice corroded by 3 years of bitterness, cheap prison coffee, and enforced silence. The magnitude of the transformation, the utter erasure of his legacy, was a psychological blow more devastating than any sentence. "I turned your legacy of greed and neglect into his purpose of giving and healing," she corrected gently, but with an unshakable firmness that brooked no argument. "And you should know, for your own conscience, if you still have a shred of one buried in there. Mia didn't lie on the stand. I found the old, detailed phone bill a month after the trial. You'd have received that text. The log shows it was delivered and read at 9:21 p.m. I saw the record with my own eyes. I just never gave it to the prosecutors. I didn't need to. Your character, your choices, your own voice on that hotel security tape ordering more wine were evidence enough for any jury." She stood up, smoothing the front of her yellow dress, a woman decisively closing a heavy, painful ledger. "The parole board chairman is an old fly fishing buddy of my father's. They've been going to the same river in Montana for 20 years. You'll serve every single day of those 25 years, Adrian. The world is already forgetting your name. In here, you'll die an old man, a number in a box, with nothing but the silence you created, that absolute hollow silence from the stairwell, to keep you company for the rest of your days. Justice, though sometimes patient, moving at the imperceptibly slow speed of grinding tectonic plates, is rarely, in the end, denied." Adrian Wolfe, who had everything, a loving family, obscene wealth, social status, lost it all, traded it all, for a single night of selfish pleasure and the arrogant belief that he was the exception to every rule. He is now left to rot in a concrete box, a forgotten footnote, with only the echoing, accusatory silence he once ignored as his eternal cellmate. Clara Vance, walking from the prison gates into the wide-open, unbounded sky, took a profound, paralyzing loss and alchemized into a global engine of salvation, a living, breathing memorial fueled by redemption and purpose, ensuring that her son's short life creates an infinite echo of good. What do you think? Did Adrian's punishment finally fit his crime, or was true justice found not in his cage, but in the thousands of breaths, the countless second chances the Liam Foundation gives each year? Let me know your thoughts below. If this story of consequence of the long, unbreakable arc of the moral universe resonated with you, please hit the like button. It truly supports the channel Winds of Thought. And subscribe for more powerful, gripping narratives exploring the heavy price of betrayal, the breathtaking resilience of the human spirit, and the long, meticulous, unforgiving arc of justice.